Hi everyone, my name is Jennie Song and welcome to Babylon 5 Revisited and Rethought. Or was it the other way around? Hi everyone, my name is Jennie Song and welcome to Babylon 5 Revisited and Rethought. I have taken a year-long hiatus from this project and I'm back. I started this project about a year ago, and at the time when I said I was going to do this, I didn't really understand how the process was going to be. It was just kind of like, oh, this is going to be fun. Let me give this a shot. I've never been on camera before. I've never written any essays before on any television shows. So I thought that maybe this process was going to be something that I could learn a lot from. I really underestimated how nervous I was going to be in front of camera. I completely underestimated how much of a terrible writer I am in my essays. And because I didn't have any really deep thinking ability, that these essays came out really superficial. And I look at them and it's like, oh my God, I wrote that. I look at them now. At the time I was like, woohoo, I wrote an essay. It's been a year though. It's been a year since I've sat in front of a camera and tried to organize my thoughts for a video. It's one thing to have a conversation with someone because they're gonna forget. But then in front of video, everything is documented. Everything from all my nods and my ums and the likes. So it's hard. So on top of all that, being able to convey an idea clearly and speaking in a free-flowing manner is hard. The pressure to This is a pressure I put on myself. The pressure to articulate well and not be misunderstood is important to me. The first time I was on camera, I was a nervous wreck. This time, after a year later being on camera, I'm about 50% a nervous wreck. I feel like I could be a little more natural, like I could actually look at the camera now and speak into the air, but it's not as bad as it was the first time around. At least now I know how to relax a little bit more. Before I was more really stiff and I couldn't really breathe well. Now I'm sort of breathing a little bit, sometimes. I tried to watch, after the last episode I watched, I tried to formulate my essay and my thoughts on it, and it was really difficult for me. I took some time off from thinking about what I wanted to write and what I wanted to say, and that time turned into a longer period of time. And after a while, I just sort of gave up on it. I watched episode 4, and that's when I gave up. I really had a hard time understanding episode 4 from the perspective that I needed to watch it. The show itself was really entertaining. Well, I don't know if it was really entertaining, but it was a good episode. It had a lot in there, but I couldn't formulate exactly what it was that I was watching that was more specific to me. And besides being on just the surface level of who I am and who I understand myself to be, trying to formulate something deeper was hard because I didn't have much else to give, I suppose, or I didn't have much more to think about beyond that, or I couldn't think about things beyond where I already was. I was already at this point, but then to excel to the next level higher, I couldn't do that because I didn't have something to fuel that, or I couldn't formulate that. I haven't reached that point. So at that point, I gave up. It was really hard, and I was just drawing a blank. So I've taken a year off, and it was for many reasons. The show was definitely frustrating for me to continue on and put all this thought into. But it was also a year where I was struggling with my own path and where I needed to go and how I wanted to live the rest of my life, like what my future was going to be. I've taken the time to just relax and be myself and learn about myself, I guess. Like during the year was about like trying to figure out who I am and what my values are and what my personal life philosophies are. I'm not still solid on what these values and personal philosophies are, but I do have a better understanding of who I am than I was from a year ago. On the very personal level, I want to be able to think at deeper levels. I want to be able to understand concepts that are, beyond just the first level. I want to be able to think, 10 steps ahead. Not many people are able to do that. So personally, I want to develop my thinking ability, my analytical ability, the logical processing ability. On a professional level, I want to be able to come to deeply understand people, because that's going to be really important in my job as a therapist. If I can understand and conceptualize beyond just the surface level, I think that the way I can understand people and the way I can help people would be beyond just throwing a manualized treatment plan for them. Oh, go and do this. Oh, when you feel like you are overloaded with your emotion, take the rubber band that's wrapped around your wrist and snap it so then you could feel like you actually exist. That's actually in a therapy book. Conventional therapy has failed long ago. That's why you have therapy, where people are coming to see you for 7 to 10 years, and you're still not getting better. And you're still not getting better because you're only doing therapy from a very limited, that's how little it is. So if I could actually help guide them to think about things, just like the way media therapy helps in being able to think about your own life and your own values, and essentially it's supposed to help shape who you are. If I could take my lessons and my learnings and from this experience, then I could help my clients going forward how to expand their own limited thinking. Conventional therapy is done from the perspective of just a therapist, and then the perspective of the client who is damaged. And this client only has a very little window of how they see their life and their problems. The therapist's job is to expand the client's perspective in that person's life in order for them to gain much more understanding, insight, and knowledge of how to handle their problems that is within a larger scope of what reality is. I think conventional therapy is outdated. The world has changed so much. And I know that I'm saying that the world has changed so much in the same breath as I'm saying that I'm going to go back to Babylon 5, written in the 90s, based on these fantastical ideas, right? Even though the characters are fictional, all these elements and all these aspects of the show are based on real humanity, are based on real experiences, history, and grounded in what humanity is. If I were to come to understand all those different areas from this watching, then professionally I would be able to help the clients that I would see. I would be able to understand and empathize them for where they are. I would also be able to help guide them in order to help solve their problems. But then I could also expand their own views of life and values to help them formulate who they are to move them forward. A lot of people are always stuck because they can only see just a tiny bit of what things are, or they're stuck because they hold on to these values that they were taught that are so rigid. but it's not theirs. And people in psychology say it all the time, that the perspective of the person is what's important. Well, that's what's problematic, that the perspective of the person is so limited, and that perspective isn't based on a reality. It's based on only one perspective that's actually really skewed. People are universally, they hold on to what is really, what makes them human. And I think if you can understand that really, really, really basic general idea with much clarity, that whatever you build upon, all those complexities then you build upon in order to understand people, would be guided in such a better direction, that you could actually tailor it, these different ideas and these different concepts and these different characteristics that people have. You could tailor it specifically to that person, to understand that person, their values, their philosophies. And when you can tie all those in together, I think that would make for a well-rounded personal development experience, which is why I'm doing this. And it would also tie into me becoming a better therapist. As I go back and think about the first few episodes that I watched when I first started this project, I very much identified with Londo significantly. The Born to the Purple episode was a very personal and culturally relevant show to me. Now as I'm thinking about Jakar, his characteristics are very similar to who I am. And ultimately, like as I'm thinking about this now, ultimately those two are in conflict with one another. So it really, now that I'm putting it, conceptualizing it in a way to understand myself, it's like having a cultural battle as well as this characteristic like Jakar that's developed. And those two people are molded together and they sum up to be me, like what my struggles are. In the beginning, I really couldn't identify with Jakar. He was someone I really didn't want to get to know. And because he was so similar to me, and because that was so off-putting, I put up this wall, and I never identified with him, especially in the beginning. What's really interesting about that was I have a lot of anger. When I first started watching this, I was a lot angrier than I was now. This anger, this feeling of anger is like really ingrained in me. For personal reasons. So as I was watching Jakar, I was looking at how angry he was, but I could not for the life of me identify with that. I couldn't admit to it. I couldn't say, oh my God, I was just as angry as him, or I'm just as angry as him, and say to myself, that's what I look like when I'm angry. You know, I couldn't even bring myself up to admitting that. I came to understand where his anger stemmed from, that it was based on all this conflict, his status, his self-identity, as well as his helplessness. Being in the middle of the situation where he's trying to fight for not only himself, but also for the honor of his people. And had I understood that back then, when I was first going through the showing, that could have been something I could have related to, and even have empathy for myself. To admit that you had all this anger like Jakar is really threatening. To know that you have all this anger like Jakar is really threatening, because you don't want to be that person. You want to, everyone wants to think that they're healthy and well-adjusted and have good self-esteem. Any flaw is really difficult to see in oneself. So when you actually see the flaws and the struggles of the characters, it's first easier to sympathize with them. And then once you understand who they are, why they struggle, then you get to learn empathy. And then when you learn empathy, I think you could be softer on yourself in order to make that resolution for yourself and be able to see what the truth of who you are is. Ultimately, from the personal perspective of media therapy, that's how you come to a resolution when you watch different shows, especially the ones that have a lot of depth and meaning, and how you could take that in order to incorporate into your own life and your own self-growth. I think you have to be in a really good place. I think you have to be very open. It's just like therapy, psychotherapy, right? You have to be willing to be molded. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, susceptible. You have to be willing to be open. Therapy doesn't work when you're guarded. Therapy doesn't work when you have this huge wall in front of you and whatever the perspective is that the therapist is trying to share with you. But the great thing about media therapy is that if you actually did it in the right way, actually it's just like what, I think it was Aristotle who said about anger, that it has to be done in the right degree, right person, right time. That all those experiences have to be held when you undertake the process of media therapy. It has to be done at the right time, the right place, the right media, and with the right intention. He was such a great character. I really liked him a lot. I think the way he played Commander Sinclair was exactly, it fits really well. I was really upset about his passing because I felt that his acting was amazing. It was great. It was natural. It was sincere. It was genuine. And when I heard that he passed, it just felt like such a waste of a talent, because he was still very young, and I hoped maybe that I can see more of his work if he were to have been in more shows or movies. But I was really upset about that. I was really upset about losing Commander Sinclair. I just started this project. So it was definitely upsetting that now when I watch Babylon 5, he's not really around anymore. Because I was in the middle of actually doing this B5 series, and because I was in the middle of doing this, and because I was becoming very vulnerable to the show, and really open to the show, and the more I was identifying with the characters, they became people that I became familiar with. And then knowing that he passed just seemed like he really, died in the show. And it was really upsetting because I started building these connections with these characters. That's why it was really upsetting. Which is strange because, this is already a show that's already been made and completed. But the idea that he's still going to be on screen is going to be nice. It's going to be the fact that I could still see him, and that his acting has been documented in Babylon 5 is going to be a good reassurance for me that he's really done this piece of work and he could be proud of it. And I can learn from him. I'll be really busy completing a year-long internship for my doctorate degree in clinical psychology. I'll be working hard on my internship, working full-time, and completing my dissertation. On top of that, I'll have a part-time job. So I'll be a little busy. But I'm definitely still committed and dedicated to doing this, and I felt like this was probably the ideal time to do this, while I'm still a student and before I officially become a doctor. And that means sacrificing a lot of my time with the money I don't have. No, I actually think that this is going to be a very good time for me. This period is going to be a period of a lot of change. And I figure having this in there in order to keep me going and keep me thinking was going to be helpful. During my hiatus, I felt very restless, and because I wasn't thinking as much about things that are more complex or thinking beyond this, like just beyond different levels, I was feeling restless and feeling like I wasn't enhancing myself. I felt very stuck and stagnant. So I think this is good timing to do this project in the middle of all this change, in the middle of getting my getting a lot of thinking going on, in the middle of doing a lot of different things between internship and dissertation. So I look forward to doing this with my full commitment, even though I'm going to be really busy. But this is something that I'm really invested in because I think it's going to change a lot. The last episode that I watched and wrote on, which was Born to the Purple, it's the one thing that I keep going back to as something that, as an episode that helped me truly resolve a really deep-seated issue. I wrote about it in my essay. Until this day, it was this one change that I've never regressed upon. I take that change forward, and I'm not the same person I was before that show and before that essay. So I'm looking forward to this project and all the changes that I'm going to make. I assume I'm going to make a lot of changes, because if that one show had that effect on me, I think going forward, the next 5 seasons is going to have something in there for me that's going to make me smarter, wiser, and more in tune with my emotions. To all the people who have been watching my videos before, thank you so much. And why? No, I'm just kidding. I'm really amazed and surprised at your loyalty and the fact that you could understand what this project is enough to have an interest in watching it. So I'm really surprised, amazed, and impressed. It means a lot to me that I get to share this with people, with other people. It also means a lot that I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable and putting this all on camera and on video. I think that this is going to be something that's going to be hard for me to watch years from now, but at the same time, it's going to be a really good gauge for me to see how much I've grown, and that would be really validating. You know, more importantly, I hope that maybe like it could really showcase and show like how other people can take media and incorporate it into their own personal learning and growth. So ultimately, this project is to really not only, it's to expand my level of thinking, understanding, and gaining insight into the different philosophies and values that different people have, not only from their personal differences, but also philosophical differences and cultural differences. But in order to get there, you would have to understand it from a very basic place that's shared by people all across the board. So that's ultimately my goal in this project. Well, what should I say that's dramatic?